Welcome to Just Go Grind, a show that focuses on helping you launch and grow a business and navigate the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Justin Gordon, and in this episode, we have Harsh Vathsangam, co-founder and CEO of Moving Analytics, an innovative company conquering heart disease through digital prevention programs. In this episode, we go through how Harsh started this company, how he got his first customers, some of the questions he was asking potential customers early on, how his fundraising experience went for Moving Analytics, how he's built rapport with investors over time and the importance of doing that even when you're not fundraising, what's fueled the growth of Moving Analytics over the past number of years, managing cash flow as a startup, how he's built his team of experts over time, delegation, how he invests in himself as CEO, and some impactful books in Harsh's journey as an entrepreneur. As always, the show notes are at justgogrind.com/podcast, and you can support the show by leaving a rating and review over in Apple Podcasts. Without further ado, here's Harsh. Harsh, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, Justin. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, and I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm excited to talk about Moving Analytics. And with this company, what are you guys doing there for people who aren't familiar?
So in a nutshell, I'd say what we provide is a at-home service for someone who's had a heart attack or heart surgery to recover safely and to get back to full health at home. The overall problem is every year there are about 3.5 million acute coronary events. And what that means is like sudden coronary events, things such as heart attacks, heart surgeries, and so on. And studies show that if you complete a post-acute rehab program, your risk of getting a second heart attack drops by up to 30 to 40%. And
Wow.
your life expectancy doubles, like your chance of living another 5 year doubles, basically. So it's a really life-saving service. And honestly, if it were a drug, it would be a blockbuster drug out there. Uh, 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 but the bad news is that despite its benefits, very few patients after these events get access to the service, because to do it, if it wasn't for us, they would have to visit a hospital about 30 to 40 times to get the service through in-person classes. So if you live far away, or if you're like me, you live in LA and parking's a big issue, you can't make it anywhere. And so it's, most people don't do it. And you know the economic and the clinical consequences are devastating, right? So like over $50 billion is spent on unnecessary care because patients don't get access to rehab and so on. So we've created a service that basically takes that whole facility based experience and replaces it with an at home experience. And we leverage the greatest and latest in technologies to make it a very seamless experience for you to get it at home and therefore get better.
And with this Harsh as well, I mean, what does that look like in terms of the patients actually using this? What does that experience entail? What does it consist of?
Yeah, so if let's take the scenario where the current status quo, right? So if you get a heart attack and you agree to join a rehab program, essentially you would have to call up the rehab facility. Oftentimes, there's a 2 to 3 month long wait list, and they would say, "Hey, okay, we'll let you know when we have a few spots available, because we only do 30 spots a day or something like that." And 2 months later, you would probably, if you still were interested, you would join the rehab class. They'd come in, they'll let you come in, they'll do a few assessments on you, they'll do an interview of you, and they'll create a treatment plan. And that treatment plan will involve you going to an outpatient facility something like 3 times a week for about an hour long class. The hour long class is usually 30 minutes of exercise and then some education that happens. Usually it's in the form of either PowerPoint presentation or group discussion. You go home, you repeat, you do this 36 times. Between those classes, you really don't have much, like you're on your own. Like, you could sit, you could exercise, no one would know, no one would ask you anything. And it's almost like a very compartmentalized scenario. Now, cut to Moving Analytics, right? So what we do is, if you are eligible for our program, we'll call you up. We'll make sure you would like to participate in the exam in our program. We'll ship you a kit. You don't have to move anywhere or get anywhere to get the kits delivered to your door. The kit usually consists of a blood pressure cuff, a weight scale, an exercise tracker, and some educational materials that is in the form of a booklet. And then you're immediately connected to a coach who's usually an exercise physiologist or a registered nurse. That coach basically does a few virtual assessments of you. So he or she may ask you to walk around the room. They may take your blood pressure, your weight scale, your weight measurements, and they'll conduct a few assessments through an app that's installed on your phone. Once all that's done, our system basically creates a treatment plan that is then further refined by the coach through a discussion with you. And by the way, all of this happens through like a telehealth visit, so it's all done through like a video call where you're on,
Yeah.
where you get all of that. And once that's in, that we create the treatment plan, we ship that off to your cardiologist who will approve it, and then through 12 visits, essentially we basically give you homework between those visits and things to do, and we track how adherent you are. But usually what we do is we don't really, it's not like a school drill sergeant, like saying, oh, you didn't do it, I'm going to do it. The whole idea is like you're coming to us because you are wanting to get healthier and better. So we're here to act as a friend resource for you and help you build sustainable habits that can help you basically get healthier. And those habits include things like exercise daily, making sure you eat right, making sure you take your meds on time. If you're stressed out and you have high blood pressure, bringing your stress levels down. If you're a smoker, helping you quit smoking. And we really work with you to resolve those patterns in the context of your day to day life. And the nice thing about that is we found that it's inherently more sustainable because like it's not like you are compartmentalizing your life like to the rehab facility and then go home and then you do whatever you want. It's actually integrated into your life on a day-to-day basis. And more importantly, you don't have to travel anywhere to get it. Like it's part of your day-to-day routines. So anyway, that's a compare and contrast in how we do our job. Yeah.
Yeah, and with that too, Harsh, I mean, it makes a lot of sense in terms of how you're going about this, and it's so much more convenient for people to have this, especially if they really want to pursue this and just to have it fit within their lives. I'm curious though, how did this get started in the first place, Harsh?
It started with three co-founders. We all met at USC, fight on. So
Yes.
I was doing my PhD in computer science, focusing a lot on how to use data science and AI to manage chronic diseases. Did a lot of work in pre-diabetic and in weight management. Uh, I had my other two co-founders, Adi and Sho, were doing their masters in engineering management and in computer science, respectively. And we met in school. And personally, for me, I was not that interested in a life in academia. I wanted to put out products that would benefit everyday lives. And when working with my research, I met Ade, who was working at the USC's Stevens Institute, which is their commercialization wing. We hit it off really well, and then we decided to say, hey, here's something that really benefits people, but here, what is it? Where's an opportunity where it can actually impact people's lives? And also, what are situations where someone would literally die if they didn't exercise as much? That's basically what led us to, basically talk to as many potential customers as possible. And it led us to a chance meeting with the American Heart Association, where they said, hey, here's a situation where someone would die if they don't exercise. And this is after they get a heart attack or heart surgery. It's really important for them to adopt healthy lifestyle habits. So this was 7 years ago, and I think it's one of those situations where the more we dug into the problem, the more interesting the problem was. And ultimately, it was an issue of like, hey, there's not enough access to care,
Yeah.
and because of silly things like transportation and cost. So you're like, what if we took that experience and reimagined for the 21st century? And that's basically the mission we're on since then towards today.
And in that customer discovery process, Harsh, like, what were some of the questions you were asking these potential customers around the idea you had and kind of this hypothesis you had about fixing this problem? What were some of those questions you had for them?
So the kinds of questions we had were, first of all, to determine if there was a problem in the first place, right? So, and when I say problem, I guess there are several dimensions to it. So number one is, is there a quality of life problem for patients? The second is there a sustainable business model that can be developed around solving that quality of life problem, right? Um, and it's interesting in healthcare because of the way the system is, where the person who receives the care doesn't necessarily directly pay for the care. those are, in fact, both of those questions need to be answered if you really want to build a sustainable healthcare company. So the kinds of questions we asked were, number one, questions that basically threw light on the original problem I stated, which is what problems do patients face today?
Yeah.
What stops them from coming? What, if they had a magic wand to resolve this issue, how would they solve it, and so on. The second angle we took was, so who would actually economically benefit from this problem, right? And why would they economically benefit? And then the answers we got there were around, hey, if a patient doesn't get readmitted, it's the health insurance company that benefits, right? So if the health insurance company is trying to reduce readmissions, they must be willing to pay for that value. And that led us to the route of trying to find health plans that are willing to cover us as a benefit, at least conditionally, if not permanently, until we proved out our results. And that informed the way we went about our business, I would say.
And with that too, then, so understand like those are the people who are gonna gonna pay for this, and that's a crucial part, especially in healthcare, is the whole business model behind this.
Yeah.
How did you decide on who you were going to pursue? How are you going to start reaching out to them to really get even your first customer on board for this?
Oh yeah. So in healthcare, evidence is really critical, probably more so than a lot of other industries. And I would say the evidence usually falls in three categories. So one is usability. So are people using this and finding a technology very easy to use? The second is clinical, where does this meaningfully improve the standard clinical outcomes that are expected for that particular condition or indication? And then the third one is economic, right? So does this product or service produce economic benefits to some party in the system that can be a catalyst for its adoption? And so when we looked at the types of customers that we wanted to get, we basically went down that order. So number one was which customer could really help us prove feasibility that people do actually want to use it. And we were lucky in that I think we were in a few business development programs at USC, and USC was kind of like our first beta test where we showed that feasibility to the Keck School of Medicine. And then we started working with other customers, such as NYU Langone and a bunch of other locations, where essentially it was small, like 20, 30 patient rollouts, where we would show that not only is it feasible for it to be used by patients, but also that the clinical outcomes improve. Once we hit a certain, I would say almost like a escape velocity there, we started focusing on the economic outcomes. And really, the last 2 or 3 years of our company's growth has been in showing in more and more cases that we can actually save costs and improve quality of care at the same time with customers. And as we thought about which customers we would go after, the nature of customers changed. So initially, we spent a lot of time with providers. Now, to show the economic feasibility, we spend a lot of time with health plans because they have the data to prove out, reduce costs, more savings, and so on. And that's been a natural evolution for us going forward.
And in the early days as well, Harsh, with this idea, you can get the validation from customers and the different people that are involved, but you have to fund this in some capacity. But I saw you bootstrap for the first 2 years. Take me through the funding side of this business early on.
Yeah, funding is definitely really a sweet or a prickly issue depending on your perspective. uh, I'd say if I had to if I had a magic wand and if I could do it again, what I would do is spend almost. I would raise a small amount of capital, less than a million for sure, probably even half a million, to just find the right customer who can show initial clinical and usability based outcomes. Um, um, and then I would raise something like $2 to $3 million to show cost savings outcomes. And then I would raise a ton more money to spend on sales and marketing to sell to other plans based on the cost saving outcomes. So that's how I would build a digital health company in the future. But I think the way what we did was, I think, we initially raised money, and we presumed that clinical and usability feasibility meant higher adoption without showing the economic feasibility. And we raised a bit more money to spend money on sales, but the sales weren't coming because we hadn't yet shown the economic pieces over there. And I think, of course, everyone learns their lessons and improves. That's part of being an entrepreneur. But I think, it's really important in healthcare, I think, to get your outcomes correct first before you start scaling sales. And I would be very careful about how we raise capital to achieve those goals.
You were kind of bootstrapping initially. So how'd you get through that time when you were bootstrapping?
I think we all had day jobs where we worked as research. In my case, I worked as a researcher at USC, and we had Ade was obviously consulting in a few places, and Shua was consulting in a few places. So I think we just found a way to. I think at that time we were still young enough that we were students, and we were able to live a quote unquote student lifestyle. So we could just survive on a lot less than we do than probably even today. But we just said, hey, this is the long term goal. Let's keep our internal burn as low as possible. Let's apply to any source of funding we can get. So whether that's like business plan competitions, grants, and so on, and let's find other ways by which we can keep ourselves personally sustained, so we can pay the rent, eat our food, and so on, while we keep building our company. And then as we grew, and when it came to a stage where it couldn't just be the three of us or the four of us to deliver to deliver the service of our company, then we went out and raised funds, right? So we made it more based on market demand, as opposed to what we thought was like, hey, we've built a great product and now we need to raise more money to build more product, basically.
And when you were pursuing then outside capital, because you knew you had to grow beyond the team you had in place at that time, then
Yeah.
how did that go for you? Because if I'm correct, you hadn't raised venture before. How did that go? How was that process? How did you approach it, at least?
Well, definitely, I think now we spent enough time in this industry. We're more savvy, but at that time, I think we relied a lot on mentors to help us get introductions to investors. Our first round was had a few professional VCs, but it was mostly a friends and family round as well. And it's, I guess, as much credibility as we can pull together and approach our friends and family to participate. And we were very lucky; we had very supportive members like that. And we relied on mentors to get introductions to the leading VCs in this space. And we worked with those mentors to also guide us through things like term sheets. I would always recommend getting good counsel. So we had good legal counsel to help us guide through the term sheets. And ultimately, we were able to sign on some great VCs who helped us with our first $1.5 million raise at that point. And I think, end of the day, what I would say is you have to be willing to trust the other person, but they also have to be willing to trust you. And and if that's great, then it's good to bring on that partner. And and that's what we had at that stage. We had really good partners whom we felt we could trust and grow with at that point.
And Sue, with you and your founders, your co-founders, was there like how long was that discussion around like equity splits, around founder agreement? Take me through how that went for you, because there's a lot of founders that are going to be early stage listening who they're going through that exact thing, and it can be such a difficult conversation. I'm curious as to how you kind of approach that, Harsh.
So I think there was a couple of things. Usually the way you would split equity, at least what way I would do it is, the person who usually the CEO gets a little bit more, or the person who's nominated as the CEO gets a little bit more. The remaining founders, depending on their roles in the company, may get either the same amount or a smaller fraction of what the CEO's percentage equity is, right? I would say the key things that I should say is, we shouldn't think of this as an antagonistic relationship. Like, at the end of the day, all the oars need to row in the same direction, and the ship will go faster, or the boat will go faster.
Yeah.
Um, it's about incentivizing each other to be the best version of yourselves, uh, and just being generous as part of that, right? To the extent that it doesn't hurt the other parties. It's more about that, and I don't think it's about like, oh, I have more and that person has less. It's about how can we both get a suitable amount and be heavily rewarded once we are successful. So it's about that. To that end, I think what we found to be super helpful is, number one, having it be a milestone or time based vesting schedule for founders, so that if, for example, there is a founder who says, "Hey, I deserve more," it opens up the question of, okay, why do you feel you deserve more? Are you willing to go at risk so that if you do achieve it, yeah, everybody's happy. It makes the company successful. It makes me successful too, because I also own equity in the company.
Yeah.
And obviously, you'll get what you feel you deserve. And then the other things on the to protect against downside, if for some person, if you find out that founder is not willing to go on that long journey for whatever reason, then you have a vested base share, so you don't give up all of your equity upfront for that company. And I think it's also important that as you're thinking about it, it's important that all founders sign up for vesting and not just one or two. I think it's super important that everybody signs up, because that indicates that we're all in this together, and we're all trying to grow the value of our company and share in the success of that. So that's my take on it as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that perspective because everyone has kind of a different story around that. I think it's helpful to
Yeah.
get those perspectives from different founders and see how they went about it to give other founders an idea of how they should approach this process. And there's something to learn from everyone who's done it, because obviously venture capital it's a small percentage of companies that will ever get venture capital, but there
Yep.
are differences within that as well. And take me through then going from that first the family friends money you raised as well, but then also you raised a few million more after that. How did after you had done the initial funding, take me through like that seed round, then getting like Harlem Capital Partners on board, like OCA Ventures. How did that go comparably to your initial funding?
So I think a lot of that was when we raised funds. We set milestones against which we would, as we achieved those milestones, the value of our company would grow, and it would bring on what I would call another tier of elite investors, right, like OCA or Harlem and so on. I think what we learned was, number one, it's really important to build a relationship with an investor, because it's not just about the capital. It's about the advice they give you, the connections they bring in, the support they give you, either future financial support or moral support or emotional support, whatever you need as a founder to be successful, right? So and we've been very lucky in that most all our major investors have been like great. Like I can call them up at any time and run issues by them, and they'll stay on the phone as long as I need them to resolve these issues. But in order to establish those relationships, it's like any other relationship. You have to build trust, and you have to build that rapport over time. And I think we've been one of our, I would say, superpowers has been that we do build that rapport over time, and that's how we got our first clinical team members from Stanford to join our company. We've had great investors who've joined our company as well. All of those folks are, just that trust gets built over time, and when they see that you're achieving different milestones, they do want to keep supporting you, right? And then either come in financially for the first time or contribute financially further as well. So and if I would basically say, it's like, number one, finding the right investors who match your profile. Like in our case, both OCA and Harlem, were really good on the healthcare side. Um, uh, and second piece is building a relationship well before you are looking at financial investment or capital investment from an investor, because you want to build that trust over time. And then at the end of the day, I think it's also important not to get too hung up on minor terms when you're getting the investment, because end of the day, everybody's trying to get the ship to be successful and reach its destination, right? So you want to kind of focus on that and not on percentage point ownership here or something like that over there. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, and on that note as well, Harsh, with building that relationship with investors, I've definitely heard that before, but for people who, maybe aren't familiar how you go about that, is it a matter of investor updates? Like how are you doing that? How are you building that relationship over time, especially before you actually necessarily need capital?
One great piece of advice I got is investor seeking investors is a sales process. It's like seeking customers, where the product is your company or the shares of your company, and investors are your customers. Because and they're looking at a return on investment, 5, 6, 10 years down the line, basically, right? So that's there. So what we've like any customer process, what you should do is always inbound works better than outbound. Warm introductions work better than cold emails. So it's always like a part of my day is consistently reaching out through my networks to get introductions to investors, like future investors, like who might invest like 18, 24 months down the line, and telling them about our company with no commitment, right? So say, hey, this is just what we're doing. Can I keep you updated? Is this something that's interesting to you? Is it fit? Does it fit in your thesis, your future? And for me to also learn from them in terms of, so what is your kind of investment thesis? What levels of companies are you looking at? What revenue milestones do they need to hit? What, and so on and so forth. So I can understand what their needs are, what they're looking to optimize for, and you just gradually build that intelligence and database. And based off that, when the time is right, you can pull the trigger and say, hey, we're currently raising around, would you be interested? In between the time where you're making that ask and you made your first introduction, I personally like to do a quarterly update where I just talk about three things we did well, and three things we've learned, and what the three things are that we are going to do for next quarter. And that just becomes like a running log of our success. And it actually helps me when I reach out to the investor again, because I can literally just go back to my history of emails with that person and say, look, this is what we did as part of that. So I try not to complicate it too much. It's usually I found that the power of the number three is really where the magic is, right? So it's just very simple. Explain what you're doing well, and what you're looking to do, and let that be a running log over time. And when the time is right, you can make the ask. And it's always important to start early rather than late, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's great advice to be kind of ahead of things with that as well, and having this relationship so venture capitalists understand when your timeline may be for funding as well. And there's a typical schedule with that as well, looking at 18 months, obviously overall in terms of the one round to the next, and that can of course vary a lot depending on the company. But with this company as well, I mean, what fueled the growth from those early days, 2013 or so, you're bootstrapped and you raised some funding. What fueled the growth to get into, I think you said, I think it's mentioned somewhere, 25 health systems or something, several payers as well. What has fueled that growth over time, Harsh?
Like I said before, in healthcare, evidence is key. And evidence is a proxy for our brand, or maybe it's the other way, the brand is the proxy for your evidence. But what we've been able to do is consistently show that we can provide clinical and economic value to our provider and health plan customers. And the more case studies we put out, the more people have been willing to trust us with larger and larger contracts and larger contract deployment sizes. And I think that has really helped us to basically it's become this virtuous circle where we achieve success. We Once we get that success, we're able to use that to leverage to bring on bigger contracts, and then we get bigger and bigger success. So I think it's end of the day like good old fashioned, hard work and doing what you say you would do, and then saying and then charging for that, right? And in terms of the value you're providing, and then as you build more and more proof points of you showing value, it's like in a video game, you go to like level 2, level 3, level 4, and and then you just have more difficulty, but it's also more fun and more responsibility as part of it as well.
Yeah, and one of the things too with obviously a startup, and you're raising a round of funding to get to the next round of funding and to reach
Yeah.
those next milestones along the way. How do you think about finances, managing cash flow,
Yeah.
prioritizing on that side? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think my view is that I'm trying to build a large company, a large and profitable company that's centered around improving the lives of patients with cardiovascular disease, right? And producing evidence-based therapies that can help improve their lives, and have health plans and other customers pay for that benefit that we're providing. So the way I think of fundraising is, obviously it would be great to go from zero to unicorn, or like serving 100,000 patients a year like within 24 hours, but you can't. There are steps that you have to do, and even from a team perspective, you have to gradually ramp up your teams so that you can actually build capacity, and also incorporate any lessons you've learned along the way, and tweak your product appropriately uh, to demonstrate value to your customers. So the way I think about it is, what is the next set of meaningful milestones that we need to achieve as a company? How much of that can be met through our own revenue needs, and how much of that is a gap in capital, where if we raised a certain amount of money in exchange for shares in our company, we'd be able to hit the next set of meaningful milestones, and then improve the value of our company going forward. So what I feel a lot of folks do is, they view fundraising as the end goal rather than the means to an end, right? Which is to
Yeah.
grow your. And so I think the way we think about it is, if we didn't have to raise funds, that's the best scenario. But unfortunately, we have to raise funds, because in order to hit a certain milestone set, there's not enough revenue we could generate today that could help us achieve that milestone set. So we look at that, we do the financial modeling. We say, okay, so this is our how much our shortfall is, who are the right kinds of investors who can help us achieve that, and then we go and start the conversation with those investors when the time is right. So that's typically how we think about it. um, and sometimes those milestones are not necessarily revenue based. If you're a device company, it could be getting FDA clearance, or if you're in the early stages of a company's growth, it is for like a certain validation study you need on your product, and so on. And you got to find the right kind of investor who believes in that milestone as you do, and support you financially to achieve that, let's say.
Yeah, and there's something to that, being very methodical on how you spend that, because you can back into the numbers relatively easy once you figure out where you're at, obviously with revenue wise, and predicting that out, especially the further along you get. And it's pretty clear in terms of the milestones you need to hit. Typically, if you ask a number of investors, they'll have some idea at least of getting to the next round, is what you need to hit, etc. And you can kind of back into what you need from there as well. But to that point, how you get there is a team in place that helps make this happen. I'm curious
Yep.
as to how you've gone about building that team, at Moving Analytics.
Yeah, I think team is the number one predictor of success to me in a company. Uh, Definitely in the early stages, even more, and definitely for sure in like the later stages too. I think the when we thought about our team, at the very least, what you need is someone who can handle, being a technology focused company, someone who can handle the tech stack, someone who can handle your operations, and someone who can handle the sales aspect. That's like the minimum team that you need as part of it, right? But then quickly, as you grow and you get more customers, you often have a backlog of features that you have to implement and prioritize. You have to have different specialists who are specifically dealing with customers' front end problems. You have to obviously invest more in sales to keep growing your company's building and growing on your company's success. And that basically dictates the kind of team you want to hire. In our case, the way we felt our company's growth should have been in the beginning, a lot of our focus was on really trying. We were not experts in cardiac rehabilitation, so we needed to bring in clinical experts who knew the space, who understood the space, and could guide us on the clinical and operational aspects of delivering a rehab program. And so we were lucky in that we found our chief clinical officer, Nancy Houston Miller, and an advisor, Dr. Bob DeBusk from Stanford, who had built and delivered a home-based rehabilitation program in Kaiser as well. And that expertise was a difference between night and day for us. It gave us instant credibility. It gave us it was possible for us to talk to clinicians, like by bringing our clinicians on board, so they could talk. As they say, they carry the union card, so essentially they could speak the same language, talk about it. So that really helped us quite a lot. As we started growing, a lot of the goals were focused on, hey, like how do we grow this product, add more features, make it a more rich product that can meet the needs of our customers, put us ahead of the competition. And that's where we invested a lot in product R&D teams who basically were looking at adding new features and so on. We put together a very robust basically product management process, and vetting and QA process in place, and so on. And then as we started working more and more with larger customers like health plans, it was obvious that the founders and the early employees couldn't take on the load of just managing such a large customer. So we started bringing on more teams who could bring in the sort of day-to-day expertise of managing a customer's needs and expectations and convey that to our product team. And it's really been evolving in that sense, dictated by the needs of our company's growth, and also the product needs and the strategic needs of the company as well.
Yeah, and one of the things to that point you mentioned is bringing on the kind of expertise that you didn't already have,
Yeah.
so you have more credibility. How did you convince them to join the startup?
Okay, let me answer this. What does not work, right? So, financial incentives do not work, according to me. I think what we've seen is the people who are successful in our company are people who like a certain way of life, where you're placed in a very ambiguous situation. I liken it to, you're placed in a room that's completely dark and you need to find your way out by a set of hypotheses. There are some people who enjoy that, basically, that kind of a puzzle. Um, uh, Whereas I think there are some people who like a steady process, and then who just like refining and refining and refining in that process. That's a different skill set, but not probably the most appropriate skill set in an early stage startup. So I think end of the day, what we found is, like, finding those people who have that sort of way of thinking, giving them an opportunity to prove themselves and showcase themselves, saying, hey, these are really tough, difficult, and open-ended situations, but you're not getting the chance to do the same thing in your current occupation. We can give you the chance, and by doing that, you get to ride the wave with us and show your own success, and our success will be linked to your success. They're just working on it that way. So I guess for me, it's more about finding people who are internally motivated to do this, and then using external motivators like a bonus or stock options and so on as more a catalyst than the reason why someone would join. And to me, that's been the strongest predictor, honestly, like more than any other piece as part of it. It boils down to, do you want to join a fast growing company and take on several responsibilities that are ambiguous? Do you get turned on by that, basically? Yep.
Yeah, yeah, it's a different person for sure that works at a startup. Yeah, it's a certain type of person that will work at a startup and be motivated and incentivized in kind of a different way as well. And kind of on that similar note, how do you look at delegation? I mean, as CEO of the company, I'm
Yep.
sure your role has shifted in the last 7 years.
Yep.
How do you think through delegating now at this point? 7 years into this company.
Yeah, as CEO, a lot of the initial code, which thankfully we don't use anymore, is written by me. So along with our CTO as well, um, and the and then it started evolving more into a sales role, and then I do a lot of our post sales management still, although we're looking to bring on more people. And Meanwhile, we've hired an amazing product team that works day and night to implement a lot of great features and put together processes. What I found to be important is, you have to learn to recognize as a founder where when you are more in the way rather than a catalyst, where you're more a hindrance than a catalyst. And you have to actually constantly seek to put yourself out of a job in different roles. Um, I think as founders, it's super easy because of the type of people who a good founder is. Like, they can do sales, they can do product, they can do customer support, but it may not be the best use of their time. And there's also a tendency to feel like you have to have control over that process, so that otherwise the quality will go away. Whereas the better way to think about this is, how can I find somebody who is better than me at this process, or has the potential to be better than me in this process? Maybe mentor them as part of a transfer of power, but then at some point make myself obsolete, and I'm more of a hindrance than a catalyst. And you can feel that, like, when once you're in a certain meeting and like you have nothing to say and that's intelligent, that's when you know you've done a good job in that team. It's very easy for founders to not give up things, but they have to give up things if they want the company to grow.
Yeah, and as a founder, especially as a CEO, I mean, you're just pulling a lot of strings and guiding the direction, but you're always going to end up bringing in people around you to do many, almost everything. From talking to so many founders on this show, that's the name of the game, really. They're bringing in smart people with high integrity in a variety of positions that can do things better than they ever could at a particular task. But then, like, as your role of CEO is really managing all of that and making sure you have the right people, right seats, and fundraising and sales and all the other kind of high level things as well, which is different than when you first get started, obviously, when you're writing code, as you mentioned.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Understanding like that side of things and your role shifting, I'm curious as
Yeah.
to how you invest in yourself and how you learn and grow as a CEO, especially the last number of years. How have you done that, Harsh?
Um, so I think number one has been identifying like what stage of CEO I'm at. Starting from like individual contributor to more a manager to a manager of managers, right, and going up that chain basically. And at each stage, personally for me, it's been so what do I need to go up to the next level, right? And more importantly, who can I bring and surround myself with in terms of great advisors who can teach me the ropes to get to that next level, and then how can I complement that with reading books, reading resources that can help me get to that level, right? So for me, it was, I would say, the different stages were obviously initial feasibility, and then clinical feasibility, and then growing sales, and so on. Um, and I think it's about finding those people and the right resources. The good news is that like basically educating yourself at this point is free or negative cost. At this point, like people will pay you to teach you things basically. So yeah, it doesn't take much, like, to literally go to Amazon and be like, uh, you know best book on scaling a business, and there you'll find like 10 books there that you can read, right, as part of it, each with its own kind of to-do list and checklist of things to do, and you can implement that in your life. You don't really need to attend a course or and so on. The other thing is, I think, finding great mentors who can help you. Both in our board and among our investors, there have been some really good mentors who, I can just go to and come with like problems and see how they think through it. And sometimes they'll be more prescriptive, sometimes they'll be more like, hey, you should do this. What are you doing here? So I think it's really that, like, you gotta recognize where you are. You gotta be honest with yourself about your limitations, and find out how you can pepper over those limitations, but also grow stronger in the areas where you are strong. And then find mentors who can achieve that, and find resources that you can use to get better and better. And personally, I like to do this on the weekends. Like, my every Saturday morning is time for self-reflection, learning. And I have my own notebook where I kind of take up a topic and see how I can learn more about it. And I keep doing that. It's really important to have the discipline to invest in yourself, because end of the day, your company will improve as a result of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something you can't highlight enough of investing in yourself as founders. It is limited by you in many ways in terms of what your company becomes. And even thinking, I think it might have been an interview or something I read of yours as well of thinking small versus thinking bigger within your company. I mean, that comes down to you. It's just how you as a founder CEO operates. And for that point as well, you mentioned books. Have there been any standouts in terms of books that were really impactful for you? I'm just curious.
Oh, so many, I would say. So there's I think it's called the, let me actually pull it up. It's
Yeah.
the there's I think the one page marketing plan. That's a really good book that I really enjoy on the sales side. There's I mean, I think there's always the Bible, which is the Steve Blank's resources on startups, right? So
Hmm.
there's the 4 steps to epiphany, the entrepreneur's field guide or field manual. All of that was extremely helpful to us. I would say, we have a few more things related to healthcare that talk about, what is a good way to deliver healthcare and so on and so forth. There's also the innovator's dilemma, crossing the chasm. One of the nice books I've read was, getting to a yes, stopping to a no to help with negotiation. All of those I think are extremely good books that I found useful.
Yeah, I appreciate the sharing that. And there's a number of those that have definitely been recommended, but a few that are new. And I think there's so much to learn from these books. And there's obviously a balance between, action and, reading something versus taking
Yep.
action. There's a mix of that. I think some people get caught up in just reading and never taking action. But at the same
Yeah.
time, like you said, kind of investing in yourself as a founder. I mean, that's how you take things to the next level. And also, as you've kind of already kind of talked about, but 7 years in, it's just a much different scenario and where you're at with the company than when you start. And you need to be able to solve a different set of problems in many ways. And so investing in
Yep.
yourself is a way to kind of improve upon that. And one of the things one of the last things I'm wondering here is just how do you recharge and kind of step away? I know you mentioned reflecting on Saturdays. What else do you do to kind of recharge or kind of de-stress? Obviously, startup can be all consuming. I'm curious in how you do that, Harsh.
Oh, so I mean, I'm lucky that I have a wife who believes in having a good life as well. So she's been a huge source of support for me on a day to day basis. Just kind of not only supporting me on my entrepreneurial journey, but also making sure that we also don't forget to lead a great life. So we anything to do with food, we both love doing things. So I like to cook, or she likes to cook to as part of that piece. Yeah, I'm a huge tennis addict, so most of my time, like if free time, I like to just go against the wall, just practice. Or if I have a tennis partner, I just go play with him or her, and or I keep watching tennis videos on YouTube as well. It's been thing there. I do enjoy reading and do enjoy cooking quite a lot. Those are all ways that I unwind as part of my day. Yeah, anything with the great outdoors, anything that gets me away from my screen, and the and more like in tune and more in the present, in the moment, in around nature, I think is like extremely relaxing as well. So I think that those are all things that keep me, I'd say, grounded, and remind me, hey, this is not a race; it's a marathon. And always try to find time to relax. I think it's actually very important to have the discipline to relax, because uh, you know I think there's even like a lot of research in neuroscience about this, where when you do think on a day-to-day basis, you're still using only your neuro frontal cortex, but there's other parts of your brain that also think at the same time, and it's really important that you get your sleep, because that's where a lot of your other thinking is done. It's really important you relax, because that's where other parts of your brain light up and process the same information. So I think it's super important to find the time to relax. It's not even a question of like, hey, it's a macho thing that I don't sleep or I work all the time. It's actually more productive and smarter if you take the time out to relax, so that you can continue to think on the problems in different ways, to see if you can solve them off. That's my take on it as well.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And I think it's so important because that does influence your decision making, and you're making so many important decisions kind of every day at a startup and guiding the ship, as you mentioned, day to day. If you're not making quality decisions because of whatever reasons you're not taking care of yourself, it's only going to impact your company in a negative way. And you might get away with it for a little bit, but to your point, it's a long game you're playing, especially in this world where you're not going to potentially have an exit for a long time if you get to that point. And even when you're looking at these relationships with investors and everything you're doing with a company, I mean, companies take time. If you're doing it right, hopefully it'll last a long time and make a huge impact, but you're not going to get there overnight. So taking care of yourself is so important. And Harsh, where can people go to learn more about moving analytics and connect with you as well?
Sure, yeah. You can definitely reach our website, www.movinganalytics.com. Follow us on Twitter at Moving Analytics, or find our LinkedIn page where we post a lot of updates as well. Those are all great places to reach out to us. My contact information is on the website, so you can reach out to me there. And happy to answer any questions or see how we could help you be healthier and happier as well.
Awesome. Harsh, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity. And I hope everybody stays healthy and free of cardiovascular disease as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Just Go Grind. If you want to follow along on the socials for all things Just Go Grind and with me as well, you can find Just Go Grind on Instagram and Twitter at Just Go Grind. You can find me on Twitter at JustinGordon212. Find me on Instagram, JustinGordon8. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.